Now, this is a short video that I've really condensed. This fellow's name is Tony Sikoria. He is a orthopedic surgeon in New England and well respected. He's the head of orthopedics. I can't remember the name of the hospital, but he got hit by lightning back in 1994 of all years. That was a kind of an interesting year. Lots of things happening in 1994. But he got hit by lightning at a cookout, and he had a near-death experience. And so he explains it here. And there's one thing I really want you to get from this. He says it about halfway through this video.
It was a weekend in August 1994, and we were going to all meet at a place called Sleepy Hollow Lake. It was a nice, beautiful day when I started, so I went to the payphone to call my mom just to check on her, and the payphone is connected to the building. I let it ring 7 or 8 times, and she didn't pick up, so I went to hang up. So I heard this loud crack, and this big flash came out of the phone and hit me in the face and just sent me flying backwards. And as I was going backwards, and something happened, and suddenly I felt myself moving forwards. And I remembered standing there and was just confused, absolutely confused, because I had seen the lightning. I knew that I'd been hit, and I knew I'd been sent flying backwards, but here I was standing there, and I'm looking at the phone is just dangling, and I'm still not making any sense out of it. And then just at that moment, I see my mother-in-law, who's at the top of the stairs, and I'm at the bottom, and she's screaming, and she's running down the stairs toward me. And I noticed that as she got down close to me, she was looking at me like I wasn't there. At that moment, the only thought that came to me was, oh, I'm dead. And that was the first realization that I had that something bad had happened. So I'm standing there looking at this body that's 10 feet away, and my mother-in-law's running over toward it, and she's screaming. And at that point, I'm calling out to them, and I can hear what they're saying. I can see them, but they can't hear or see me. And suddenly I have this realization that, oh my God, I'm thinking.
This is what I want you to remember.
And I'm thinking and having thoughts just like I normally would. And the realization came that whoever I am, I always am. And whatever's on the floor is nothing more than a shell. I was having a full out-of-body experience. I was completely separated, and I was going someplace else. I felt like when I got out, I was suddenly immersed in this bluish-white light. And in that white light was truly the most amazing feeling. If you could imagine absolute love and peace. And I was absolutely taken by how great it felt, and I thought, this is the best thing that could ever happen to somebody. Right about the time that I thought this is the greatest thing that could ever happen, and suddenly it's like somebody snapped their fingers. I was back in the body, and my little trip was over.
The thing I want you to notice, where he said, oh, I'm thinking just like I normally think, and I'm not in my body. And he's really surprised that he can do that out of body. Now, that story is not uncommon. That's a common story. Hundreds, thousands of people who have near-death experiences have that awareness and are totally surprised that they can think while they're outside of their body, while they are actually, their essence is being non-physical. He was calling out to them. They couldn't hear him at all. He was actually experiencing being able to think in a non-physical presence. That's what I call the third self. I call that the third self. That consciousness survives the body. That third self consciousness actually comes into the body in the beginning from goodness knows where, but comes into the body and becomes a human here on this earth. But that consciousness is not physical. That aspect of and in fact, when the third self is having an out-of-body experience where it's non-physical, it's in the middle of a near-death experience, the brain shuts down. The brain is completely inactive without the third self in the body. That's what happens when we sleep. We go unconscious, and the third self just goes off and does whatever it does in dreams. And then it comes back, and we wake up in the morning. And we wake up in the morning because the third self comes back in. Just like Tony Sikoria's experience. He said it was like a snap of the fingers, and he was back in his body and experiencing excruciating pain from his ankle got injured when he was thrown 10 feet back. Experiencing excruciating pain that just a split second before he was not experiencing any pain whatsoever when he was in the non-physical. That's the thing that I want you to know and learn from these near-death experiences. That is the third self. That's the third aspect, the third dimension of your consciousness. So who am I? Who are we at this point? So I'm saying you, the you that you think you are, is this third self. You are like a facilitator. You're like a manager of your left and right hemisphere. That third self is not your higher self, just to clear up any confusion there. This third self is normal, thinks normal. And it observes you and observes your thoughts and is self-reflective. And you can be out of your body in third self, as the near-death studies show. And when you're out of your body, you're free of conditioning, you're free of pain, you're non-physical. So many people who have near-death experiences say, oh my God, this is peaceful, this is the greatest feeling in the world. And one of the reasons it feels so great is you're free of all the bullshit conditioning that is part and parcel of your left and right hemisphere, especially your left hemisphere, has all these self-judgments that when the third self goes back in the body, oh my God, here we go again. I'm back to my normal self, feeling crappy. So this consciousness of third self, the near-death studies show, does not need a body to be conscious and have thoughts. But that third self is woven into the body when the body is alive and operational. But when the body dies, that third self survives death as the non-physical creature that it is. So when it's in the body, it's like driving a car, but it's a little bit different than a regular car. It's like your third self. If you think about like having a bench seat all across the front seat, and you're in this car, and the steering wheel is right in the middle. It's not on the right, not on the left. It's right in the middle. And you've got your left hemisphere on your left, sitting next to you. You're sitting in the middle. You've got the steering wheel. Your left hemisphere is on the left side. Your right hemisphere is on the right side of you. You're sitting in the middle. Guess who's got the brake? And guess who's got their foot on the gas? Okay. Well, if you guessed your left hemisphere has its foot on the brake, you'd be right. You're the third self, facilitator. You observe your thoughts. You can be out of body, like the near-death studies show. You're free of conditioning. You're non-physical when you're out of the body. The consciousness of the third self does not need a body. And you're woven into the body when you're in there. But it's like you're driving this car and your left hemisphere has got its foot on the brake. And your right hemisphere has got its foot on the gas. And sometimes, you know what happens when you have your foot on both? Well, it's not easy on the car. Let's put it that way. When you got your foot to the floor on the gas and you're holding on the brake at the same time. That's how people on motorcycles do wheelies, by doing that little maneuver. So this third self is the consciousness that survives the body, and it doesn't need the body to think. Everything that I've said so far with the first three conscious systems is all supported by science. In the case of the third self, it's all supported by empirical evidence. Like Tony Sikoria's story has been confirmed. Everything that he saw when he was out of body was what actually happened, even though his body was dead on the ground and totally unconscious. His mother-in-law running towards him and screaming. His body didn't know that, but he knew that when he was out of the body. And so that near-death experience is confirmed by third parties. So it's got its own scientific aspect to it. Now, what I'm going to talk about right now, I confess I don't know that I can make a scientific case for this. This information comes from what's called the Seth material. And the Seth material is, well, back in the day, there were books written. It was like back in the 70s and 80s. There was a woman in Elmira, New York, who was channeling this non-physical entity called Seth. And she did this for any number of years, and her husband transcribed the sessions that she had with Seth. And so quite a few books are out there about from the Seth material. One of the most interesting ones is called The Nature of Personal Reality. And in that book, Seth talks about something that he refers to as the inner self. I call it the profound self, but he calls it the inner self. And it is a portion of your consciousness that remains non-physical, that is always non-physical. And if I had to give you one little thought to begin to wrap your head around this, it's not exactly that, but you could think about it's like having a guardian angel. Let's call it that. But this guardian angel is not really, this guardian angel is actually you. It is that portion of you that remains in the non-physical and that can manipulate reality inside the physical. And it's your helper in this life. When you make decisions, she orchestrates their manifestation. She marshals and she enrolls and enlists whatever resources that, in the universe that are needed to bring your decisions to fruition. When people make a commitment to something, some of that commitment can be accomplished by the individual. But we often experience when someone makes a really strong commitment to something that sometimes just things seem to fall in their favor. You know what I'm talking about? Just seems to fall into their favor. That these serendipitous events happen that allow them, that enable them to get closer and closer to this thing that they're committed to, that they made a decision about it, about. And so this profound self, think of it like, again, like a guardian angel. It's out there, non-physical, invisible. This guardian angel can send you clues. This profound self of you can send you signs, serendipitous events, can send you unexpected help, resources, can even create miracles. But this profound self is always constrained by your decisions. You need to decide. When you decide something, that gives your profound self a green light to start orchestrating the events, the ones that are beyond your control, to make it happen. Now, your job is to just decide. You make the decision, and then you come up with a first step. And then if you, in addition to make the decision and come up with a first step, and you say, I surrender the rest of the unfolding to God, to the universe. I surrender the rest of the unfolding of this to my profound self. That's how it works. That's how creating your life, that's how it works. You make a decision, you come up with the first fall off a leg easy first step. You entrust and surrender the unfolding to something beyond you. You've done everything you need to do. That's all what's within your pay grade. Now, there are some people that think, oh, I got to make everything happen. I'm all alone in the world. There's that bugaboo, the all alone part. You're not alone. But a lot of us think we're alone, and we have to do it all. We have to do everything. We have to just make it happen. And that's sometimes like pushing a noodle uphill. You can't do it. You can do something. You can decide. You can come up with a couple of steps, and you can. But unless you do some surrendering, you're going to be plagued with thinking, "I have to do this. I have to do this." When if you just surrender, it'll just happen. You give a big green light when you make a decision. You give a big green light to your profound self to start orchestrating all kinds of events, serendipitous events, unexpected help, unexpected resources, even miracles. And when you start doing it that way and let go of the details, you let it go, oh my God, your life gets so much easier. So much easier. Sometimes you make bad decisions, though. Well, not horrible decisions, but just not the best decisions. Let's say the good, bad, and the ugly. Well, sometimes your profound self will orchestrate even those dodgy decisions that you make, just so you learn something. And that's what's useful about life. You know, here's a human here on this earth in Earth School, and we'll orchestrate those details into physical reality. But it's not going to. It's going to most of the time keep you safe, though. So the more you decide, the more you make decisions, the more you sit down and go, okay, I'm determined that this is not going to be so. I don't know how I'm going to pull this off, but my first step is I'm just going to walk away. And then you surrender it. And when you surrender it, then you give all kinds of leeway to your profound self, in addition to what I call this big green light. The more you decide, the more leeway you give to your profound self to orchestrate your life. And you're going to love it that way. It is so much easier, and you get better results. And you can have a direct relationship with your profound self. All you have to do is decide that too and start talking to it. And you can even, at some point, ask its name and discover that. That is the fourth dimension of your consciousness. That's your fourth team member. You've got left hemisphere, right hemisphere, third self, non-physical third self, and now you've got profound self. So two aspects of your consciousness are physical, and two aspects are not physical. So what's inspiring about all this? You're the third self. You are pure consciousness. You are uncontaminated. You are free. You are peace and love. You are curious and love potential, and you love surprise. You have innate joy. That's when you're out of the body now. This is third self. But you are not your body. Third self is not your body. It is not your brain. It's not even your mind. But your third self consciousness is, call it, you're saddled into your hemispheres. You are woven into the fabric of every cell in your body, that consciousness of your third self. And that's what it is. That's what life is like. You're a third self that came here to live in a body for however many years, and then to learn how to create inside of this physical system that we call Earth School. And then when you're done with that, you learned all you can. Maybe you live a few more lifetimes. I kind of like the idea of multiple lifetimes, because that explains a lot of stuff, if reincarnation happens to be true. But then there may be a time that you've lived enough lives, that you've learned enough, that you've graduated to something. We don't know what. I don't know what. But I think there's a purpose to it all. I think there's a great, big, grand purpose to it all. So you have this spiritual self that exists in the non-physical, has all this knowledge about you and is dedicated to you. This profound self knows everything about you. If you do give some consideration to acting as if reincarnation, what if it is true? your profound self has all knowledge of you from every single lifetime you've ever lived. Has all that knowledge. Now, there's no way you could have it. If you think if you live 500 lives, you think you could hold the physical memory of 500 freaking lives in this brain? Good luck with that. But your profound self, on the other hand, is totally non-physical and has this capability we can't even dream about. It has all this knowledge and it knows you. And it's the larger you of which you are a beloved part. It's the larger you of which you are a beloved part. And she orchestrates events for you based on your beliefs, your current beliefs, your current intents, desires, and life skill. So I say on your current beliefs, intents, and desires, because the idea is get better and better and better. Hone and sharpen up your beliefs so that your beliefs are more accurate. Like, don't believe I'm a moron. Don't believe I'm not good enough. That's a belief that is not going to help you. Take it on. I'm totally smart enough just the way I am. I'm totally know enough to make decisions and let my profound self handle the details. I can decide according to my intense desires and my life skill. So that's your profound self. And that is the 4 dimensions of your consciousness. So what do we do now? I'm not even sure what's on this slide, so I better go look. Okay, so we have 2 independent conscious systems in our brain. This is what we now know right now. We have 2 independent conscious systems. We have a right and left hemisphere that are very, very different from each other, and they can get into conflict. We, as third self, we can think. As third self, we are non-physical, and we have the opportunity. I'm not going to call it an obligation because it is truly, we have this opportunity to manage the left and right hemispheres of our brain by beginning to talk to them, actually, giving them names, asking them what their independent conscious systems. There's, like Jill Bolte Taylor said, this is real, really 2 personalities. Alan Ola says, as if 2 personalities. This is real. And then you can ask them. You can start to have conversations with them because now you know what they each does. You know what each of them thinks is important. Like the left is all about success in the future. The right is all about enjoyment in the right now. Just knowing those 2 things helps you differentiate between the left and right hemisphere of the brain. And you can now, on that basis, you can say, I want to talk to you on my left hemisphere. Now, you do all this judging of me, and I'm going to ask you to consider slowing down all that self-judgment, slowing down making up all that stuff, making up those stories. Can you slow that down? And how about if you and the right hemisphere, who's always in the moment and loves pleasure, and helps us avoid stress, how about if the 2 of you begin to work together? This is you at third self now. As third self, you're asking your left hemisphere, would you be willing to work with your right hemisphere? You can have that in what I call a structured daydream. Mary was talking about doing more daydreaming. I think this is part of what she's talking about. You can sit down and have this structured daydream where you have this conversation with your left hemisphere, and it's going to give you answers that will often surprise you. Same thing with your right hemisphere. She will answer your questions and often will surprise you in her own way. And you're going to discover they each have different ways of thinking about things, and they each have different answers, often to the same question, very different answers from each other. So in having your profound self, we have this spiritual dimension. We are not alone. Oh my God, how many times? I would love to say that 2 more times. We are not alone. Our profound self is always, always, always with us and is awake 24/7. Our profound self is the grand orchestrator. Remember that, the grand orchestrator of events in your life that are beyond your ability to force them to happen. This is our team. This is what we have to work with, our 4-dimensional team. And as third self embodied, we are the decision maker. Third self embodied in the left and right hemisphere, we are the decision maker, and our profound self is the grand orchestrator. This is our four-dimensional consciousness. This is what we now know, and I'm encouraging you to act as if this is true, just for the 21 days that we're together. Pretend that this is true. And with this four-dimensional self, we are a very powerful light being in a body, a powerful light being in a body, and we just never knew it. We never knew that there were these four dimensions for us. In fact, we never knew that there was any distinction between the left and right hemisphere before. In fact, the right and the left hemisphere didn't even know anything about each other until they heard this whole conversation with us right here, right now. Your left and right hemisphere didn't know the neuroscience about it. Your right and left hemisphere and your third self, you did not know as third self that you are apart from the body. You know, how many times actually there are, the spiritual gurus, I've been hearing this for years. They all say, you are not your body. How many, have you heard that? You are not your body. You are not. Well, I've just given you the proof and the reasoning as to how it is that you're not your body. That's your third self that can that can have thoughts and think when the brain, the left and right hemisphere, are unconscious, like on the operating table or having been hit by lightning. So we, just knowing about these four dimensions, we can come to this very profound conclusion that we are a very powerful light being in a body here on this earth in this lifetime.